IQ is probably one of the biggest pseudoscientific swindles of all time. This test, initially created to vet students with learning difficulties from the rest, morphed into this one-size-fits-all measure of intelligence. Its scientific foundation is not robust, and scientists like Nassim Taleb highly criticize its validity.
All I'm saying is that these tests they're discussing don't map to their claims.
But still, a lot of successful and highly intelligent people swear by it.
You probably need 120 points of IQ.
People who boast about their IQ are losers.
And the implications of this are massive. From eugenics programs, which used IQ to justify race hatred in the past, to arbitrarily ranking nations and ethnicities on some imaginary national IQ in the present, putting entire people in a box for the rest of their lives.
Blacks on average have a lower IQ than whites. However, whites are not at the top.
So in this video, I want to share with you how IQ might be a good measure to select test takers and obedient paper shufflers, but a terrible indicator of real-life, complex, multi-dimensional intelligence. And I will also share, leaning on rigorous research and ancient wisdom, how creativity trumps IQ in real-life problem solving.
Read the directions carefully. Be sure you understand what you're asked to do.
Now look, I'm not a statistician, but I'll be leaning on Nassim Taleb's rigorous research on IQ. But before we get into that, let's go back to the history of IQ testing. The first IQ test was created by Alfred Binet in 1905 in France. And his goal was to identify students with learning difficulties who needed extra help in school, not to measure intelligence. But then it was repurposed by Thurman and Goddard as an innate intelligence test. The two popularized the test, and that's how it made it to public institutions, schools, and even the military. The US Army historically used it to select and assign different roles to different people based on their IQ. Some will be disqualified because they were deemed mentally unfit. At a certain point, racialists hijacked the tool. Their goal was to enforce racial superiority and discriminate against other races. That's when the eugenics movement started gaining traction and had the support of prominent figures like Churchill at the time. Which makes sense, right? If intelligence is genetic, then why not take this to its logical conclusion? Let's discriminate against low IQ individuals, even stop them from reproducing, and improve the whole genetic pool of humanity by encouraging superior races to reproduce. Let's also stop immigration from specific countries with inferior races, which is exactly what happened in the US in the 1924 Immigration Act, which severely restricted immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe, as well as Asia. Now you may think that all this crazy eugenics movement is behind us, but the residue of the ideology is still here. A lot of the free press and renowned authors in the behavioral genetics field covertly push the idea today. Now, because of years of schooling we undergo and all the tests we take, we may unconsciously believe that our intelligence is genetically limited, that we're not able to accomplish something of significance in our career, studies, or in our field. That other people who accomplished exceptional things are just cut from a different cloth genetically. But I'm here to tell you that that might not be the case.
There's no miracle, people. It just happens they got interested in this thing and they learned all this stuff. They're just people.
I had a personal observation lately that I wanted to share. I realized that growing up, I was never the top student in class. I worked the minimum in school to be able to pass classes successfully while intensely pursuing my other interests on the side. I did well in high school and accidentally overshot to be able to get into a nice business school. Same throughout university. I just worked the minimum to be able to pass to the next class successfully. There were far brighter students who performed extremely well in tests and ranked at the top of the class. By school standards, they were extremely intelligent. But my observation was, still being in contact with a lot of these bright students, a lot of them had a harder time once they left school. Once out there in the real world, they were not the ones with the highest incomes or the best careers. And yes, income matters because it's the only hard measure you can have for someone's intelligence. As Nassim Taleb said, you can buy groceries with $30, not so much with a good grade or an academic award. And that's what Nassim Taleb highlights in his paper. IQ might measure unintelligence, but once IQ is above a certain level, it does not correlate with much.
How much of the variable is not explained by IQ? So take annual income, 5% not explained by IQ above 120. Occupational attainment, 99% almost. Education, 97% not explained by IQ.
Even worse, these standardized tests might be selecting for a specific type of people. And it may be saying a lot more about the test itself and how it was conceived and people who back it up than the person being tested. That's when an extremely useful heuristic comes in handy, Wittgenstein's ruler. This heuristic explains that unless you have full confidence in the ruler's reliability, if you use a ruler to measure a table, you may also be using the table to measure the ruler. Let me explain with an example. When prizes like the Nobel keeps getting awarded to non-deserving individuals, it tells us a lot more about the awarding committee of the prize more than the winner's actual accomplishments. If someone highly criticizes an author's work, it might tell us more about the person's actual ability to understand the concepts than the book. And in the case of the IQ tests, it may tell us a lot more about the validity of the test itself than the intelligence of the person taking the test. Nassim Taleb argues that IQ tests primarily measure test-taking skills more than real-life intelligence or creativity. One indicator of that is that IQ can be improved through practice of the test itself, and it does not robustly predict life outcomes in the future. It's an overly simplistic number that cannot measure the different ways a human can be intelligent. We'll get to that in part 3 of this video, but if you want to measure how someone performs in a specific task, let's say coding, investing, marketing, you need to measure their performance at that specific task, not their performance at an arbitrary test and then extrapolate that to a general intelligence, as if humans can be good at everything. Look, I'm originally from Morocco, where we still have some challenges with illiteracy, especially with the older population, but I know older successful people in Morocco who couldn't even read or write, and they're extremely wealthy. Most of them dropped out of primary school to work. They're probably not gonna fare well at an IQ test. So by the pro IQ psychologists, they're probably mentally unfit. But guess what? They're much richer than the psychologists. What they have is a combination of street smarts, business acumen that they actually acquired in the real world, some in an actual souk setting. And honestly, they're a lot more smarter and wiser than a lot of overeducated people I know. They can see threats, identify opportunities, negotiate well, and see the right patterns in daily life. Ultimately, they're not suckers. In a moment, we'll get into how the ancient Greeks also saw the different types of intelligence. IQ promoters really want to emphasize the genetic aspects of IQ and present the argument that 70% of IQ is heritable.
It's not like the cards are dealt out equally. They're not dealt out equally.
How
at
much
all.
of that is genetic?
Most of it.
That smart parents will have smart kids because of genetics. But that may just mean that educated parents will have educated kids who are well trained at taking tests and also score higher at intelligence tests. And their last argument is that that's the best we have to test intelligence. And honestly, that's the worst argument. It's like navigating New York City with a map of Chicago because that's the best you have. Problem is, an overemphasis on IQ might cause us to miss out on highly intelligent people, like Richard Feynman, who only scored 120 on an IQ test. Intelligence is a more complex phenomenon, and that's what we're gonna talk about next.
Human beings have very different kinds of intellectual strengths. If we all had exactly the same kind of mind and there was only one kind of intelligence, then we could teach everybody the same thing in the same way and assess them in the same way, and that would be fair.
In one of my favorite books by Nietzsche, The Birth of Tragedy, he explains how humans are basically driven by two different forces. The Apollonian on one side, which represents logic, order, clarity, and rationality, and the Dionysian on the other side, which is raw emotion, instinct, and primal forces. Academic intelligence is this Apollonian force. We still need it, of course. But the Dionysian intelligence is that kind of intelligence I witnessed in Morocco. Wealthy entrepreneurs who never had a formal education, but through instinct and real-world business acumen, made a fortune. The ancient Greeks, on the other hand, talked about 5 types of intelligence. First is phronesis, which is practical wisdom and prudence. That's really important in governance, for example. Navigating complex social situations, balancing different competing values, and understanding the human condition. Second is technique. This can be craftsmanship, a technical skill like engineering, coding, dentistry. Third is episteme, which is scientific knowledge. Knowledge that can be proven through logical reasoning. Fourth is nous, which is intuitive intelligence, or direct insight, which is the mind's capacity to intuitively understand a concept, what the French call vif d'esprit. And lastly is métis, which is cunning intelligence. In Greek mythology, it's associated to Odysseus and his ability to adapt to changing circumstances. It's the street smarts that those businessmen in Morocco also have. Now see, Nassim Taleb in Anti-Fragile talks about how being anti-fragile is superior to trying to be intelligent.
I showed in Anti-Fragile, and that's the main argument, that trial and error will always outperform design, simply because of that property, that we're vastly more intelligent. We have an IQ of 1,000 when we do trial and error.
You want to have a process of trial and error in your field, career, or business. You want to benefit from the stressors of life and be exposed to positive upside and limited downside. In a world you can't predict, real intelligence is thriving in this uncertain world. It's surviving first to stay for the long run, while being ready for the big opportunities. It's choosing the right vehicle and skill set for your career. Being in touch with your inclinations and strengths. It's writing your own script that fulfills your soul instead of following someone else's script. It's being extremely prudent most of the time, but being highly aggressive when the right opportunity presents itself. As I mentioned, I was not the best student in school. I just overshot occasionally to get access to the right schools that will get me the right job afterwards. But I was opportunistic. I knew that I had a window to leave my home country, Morocco, and I squeezed the most out of that opportunity when I moved to France. I also knew how to navigate my career in the right way in sales and be promoted at 26 to manage a global team of more than 10 people. I learned management and leadership and leveraged this track record to move here to New York City. I cultivated my interpersonal skills, built alliances, and had people open doors for me. Now, can you test someone for all of these skills on an IQ test? I don't think so. This is the real world. Life almost never presents clear-cut questions with clear answers. Real-life decision-making is opaque, uncertain, and messy. And that's the intelligence you need. Creativity trumps IQ at every level. There is a unique combination of skills and perspective that only you can contribute. That's how nature works, through distributed search. It wants to maximize every type of skill and genius it can have. And some geniuses just trusted themselves more than anyone else and embarked in high-risk, high-reward endeavors. I'm not saying that everyone's a genius, but you have something that you can contribute, and an IQ test may not identify that. That's it for today. Don't forget to subscribe and like, and I'll see you in the next video.